In a recent interview, Neil Druckmann was asked about the possibility of The Last of Us Part 3, a new sequel and continuation of the story of The Last of Us. And his response was, as you can expect, not definitive, but he did say that he believes that there is more story to tell. And I would agree. Unlike The Last of Us Part 1, which has an open but yet satisfying ending that could easily have been the conclusion of the series, The Last of Us Part 2 ends with a lot of intriguing, unsolved mysteries, and does not feel satisfying as the conclusion to this series. Dr. Pooplove here, and today I want to talk about the stories left to tell in The Last of Us Part 3. And stick around until the end because I want to address a particularly contentious topic that appears to have fans torn on which direction the story should really go. But let's get right into it. And the first story left to tell is what is going on with the Fireflies. Abby and Lev, after much searching in Santa Barbara, are able to radio to a group of reformed Fireflies gathering at Catalina Island. And you can tell that they make it there after you beat the game by looking at the loading screen, where you can see their boat beached right outside. But what the heck is going on with this faction? After Joel wiped the Fireflies out at the end of Part 1, the group disbanded, with Abby's group in particular heading for Seattle to join the Washington Liberation Front. If the Fireflies have regrouped, you have to assume there is a new spark of hope in the world that they must be clinging to. Have they potentially found a doctor capable of making a cure? Or is there a new vision of a post-apocalyptic USA in store? Of course, the Fireflies weren't always about making a cure, so they could have another mission in mind, but another compelling angle could be that a con artist has decided to hijack the Firefly name in hopes of gaining power and spreading a bad faith ideology around. And by following Abby and Lev and their journey to the Fireflies, we would also be able to understand the story of what happened to these two characters. The biggest mystery is, what is Abby's fate? During her struggle with Ellie in the final battle in The Last of Us Part 2, she ends up biting off some of Ellie's fingers from the very hand that only hours earlier was bitten by an infected. Surely this must have some impact on Abby. Perhaps it somehow transfuses and transforms her blood such that now Abby is also immune? Or maybe she does turn infected. It might be an interesting angle to think that perhaps, since it wasn't a direct bite from an infected, that her turning process might be much slower than normal, and might even give her time and force her to seek Ellie out in hopes of getting a cure in time. Of course, that then begs the next question that the story should answer, and that is, where is Ellie, and how has she potentially found peace having let go of Joel and tried to move on from her quest for revenge? Does she now react differently to survival scenarios from how Joel would have acted? Or has she become desensitized and grim like Joel was when we found him at the beginning of Part 1? And how might Ellie react if there is the opportunity to be given a conscious choice to share her gift of immunity? Many think that the immunity storyline is over, but I kind of think it can't be for nothing. Of course, another question that The Last of Us Part 3 should answer is, what are the fates of Ellie's friends? Tommy, Dina, and Baby J. When we last saw Tommy, he was pretty beat up, both physically and mentally. How does he cope with the loss of his brother and the ruination of his marriage to Maria? Is he still held in high regard in Jackson? And with Dina, where did she take Baby J? Will she ever speak to Ellie again if they were to cross paths? And how does Baby J adapt to the harsh realities of this post-apocalypse? It may be interesting if Part 3 takes place several years into the future and we see how he has grown through some tremendous hardship. Now, before I get to perhaps the most contentious mystery that The Last of Us Part 3 could answer, I want to talk about another interesting storyline that we might be able to expect that's very near and dear to my heart, and that is, how might The Last of Us Part 3 weave into the story of The Last of Us factions? We know that Factions 2 is going to have a story, and I assume that story will continually evolve and change as the game receives their live service updates. And I am particularly curious how that story may play into The Last of Us Part 3. Will we perhaps run into members of a San Francisco-based faction in the Part 3 storyline? Or do we see a side character from The Last of Us Part Part 3 depart for the city, only to now find them in the latest update for Factions 2, giving quests? And are there other opportunities to feed us more lore as to how the world turned upside down that may offer additional layers that can actually enrich both storylines? This will be especially interesting to uncover. But now I get to the storyline that I think may be the most hotly debated, and something that we won't be able to find out for sure until Naughty Dog actually starts speaking about this game. And that is, who are The Last of Us? And to put it another way, what is this series actually about? And from what I have found, it seems that there are essentially 3 potential answers to this question that, of course, we will not be able to find out until at least we get a reveal. Some believe The Last of Us Part 2 handed the torch off to Abby and Lev, as the events of both games have led to their meeting and their continuation of the story. Others believe The Last of Us can be about anyone, as the essence of the story is to show us how survivors of the post-apocalypse are getting by. And with that, some would prefer a tale taking place somewhere completely new, with a completely new cast. But I happen to believe that The Last of Us is a story about Joel and Ellie from start to finish, and that at its core, this series is about these 2 characters. But that means that Joel's presence would have to be felt somehow, even in the 3rd game, with him being long dead, which you might think isn't possible. But I do think there's a way for that to happen. And that's why I came up with a loose framework of a story that does make The Last of Us Part 3 very much about Joel and Ellie. And you can find that story here in this video. But let me know what stories you would like The Last of Us Part 3 to tell, and otherwise, so long, Pooper Troopers.